expressing that marvel which ordinary people also will feel, extraordinary people also will feel. Ascharya. We are that Ascharya. Man is a wonder. Man is a marvel. Don't reduce yourself to dust. Don't reduce yourself to a creaturely position. Within that there is something wonderful. That is the one truth we must impress upon all our children. That you are not this tiny little baby. Behind you is infinite energy and power. That is the first Vedantic teaching for every child. A teaching which the child will realize as true as he grows up and becomes mature. That is the one truth that is central to all Vedantic teaching. So, verse 30 tells us, Dehi nityam avadhyoyam dehe sarvasya bharata tasmat sarvani bhutani natvam shochitum arhasi. This Dehi, the self, Dehi means one who lives in the Deha, is called a Dehi. So Deha and Dehi. Deha is the body, Dehi who dwells in the body. Dehi nityam avadhyoyam. None can destroy the Dehi at any time. That is the nature of this infinite truth. Dehe sarvasya bharata. In all bodies, this self or Dehi is indestructible. Tasmat sarvani bhutani natvam shojitum arhasi. You did not therefore grieve for any entity, any being in this world. You can never touch that real dimension of the human system. Somebody takes away my shirt, it has not affected me. I can take another shirt. In that way, we speak of material things. But those who know the subject, they say, whatever you may do to the body, myself is untouched. If that is kept intact, then there will be nothing to worry. Stronger the person, the more is the capacity to express this truth in life and action. Greater courage, greater endurance, all this will come. Like that Jewish scientist in Hitler's prison. They were all subjected to tremendous pressure, all sorts of persecution, suffering, creating tension, stress. Many perished in that kind of a treatment. But one survived, and he wrote a book, Viktor Frankl. He lives in New York now. The Search for Meaning. That's the title of his book. And there he mentions, I was subjected to so much of pressure, so much of persecution. I would have broken down. But I detached myself from the body, began to think of myself as a sakshi, as a witness of what is going on, as the self. I could stand all this pressure on me. My mind was perfectly undisturbed at the end of the war, so I could write this book as a result of those experiences. There he calls it attitude control. You cannot control what others do to you, but you can control your attitude towards those things. That is in your hands. There is a very remarkable statement made by Viktor Frankl, The Search for Meaning. Attitude control. Somebody abuses me. Well, he abused and went away. I took it in, I nursed it, and became a serious thing for me. I went even committed suicide because I am weak. If I am strong, yes, he has said a few words. What did he say? All the 26 words of the alphabet, he has put together and said something. That way you can say and dismiss the whole thing. That needs a lot of strength. So attitude control is a very great lesson for all of us. Mostly we are our own enemies. We create trouble for ourselves. Others only give a little trouble. We multiply it by ourselves. Their attitude control can save that situation. That it is true, it was proved. Viktor Frankl refers to an experience in the American war prisons in Italy. One ward was full of highly suffered army, soldiers. Hand is gone, leg is gone, such type of people. Very much suffering. Then another ward, minor injuries in the battle. They are under treatment, and serious injuries on one side, and they are also under treatment. An investigation showed people who had serious injuries, they were more peaceful, more cooperative, and in this less injured people you will find so much of complaint, stress, no peace of mind. There's something strange. How could it be? These people should have been much more in distress than these people. Then they found on investigation that power of attitude. In the case of these less injured people, they were people who will be soon treated, set right, and they know they will be sent to the front once again. In this ward, they knew their war is over. They will go back to their wife and children. They were perfectly at peace. The leg is gone, doesn't matter. We shall live with our people. Now here you can see two situations, two reactions to various situations. So it proves the idea of attitude control. So that book gives you this truth, which only breeds the great truths that you find mentioned here. Ascharyavat Pashyarik Ascharyajanam. If he understood a little bit of this truth he got tremendous strength out of it. He had that calmness of mind. He could write a book to enlighten other people. Otherwise, I would have been completely destroyed by the treatment. So these are the truths. Man standing at marvel towards looking at that man. There is something wonderful in that human being. In me also, the same wonderful thing is there. Let us study a little in the course of our work, in the course of our day-to-day relationship. Let us study this subject a little and come closer to that marvel that is our true nature. That is all the Gita tells. And the Gita especially stresses that this marvel can be realized in the context of man's life, work, and interhuman relations. You need not have a separate life for it. Life itself is religion, as Vivekananda said, because that religion, which is the spirituality, is my true nature. I am not to borrow from somebody. So this concept of the inherent divinity of man, its infinite nature, is at the back of Krishna's teaching throughout this book hereafter. This first part of the second chapter, he is using these arguments to tell Arjuna, why are you afraid of entering into this world, entering into the battle? You are not an ascetic. You have got so many things to do here. All this is being argued about to make Arjuna take part in the war in front. Many more worldly arguments will come later. When he found these arguments did not click with Arjuna, he used worldly arguments also, that they are coming in the next few verses. Natvam shojitam arhasi. You need not grieve over these people, saying they will be killed. Their own true nature is beyond anybody's destruction. Just like space. You cannot destroy space. You can destroy everything. You cannot destroy space. Similarly is this, the more subtle a reality, the more beyond destruction as well as birth is that reality. Here you have the subtlest reality, the Atman or Brahman. Then he says, now, you are a Kshatriya. Swadharmapi chaveksha navigambitum arhasi dharmyadhi yuddha chayonyat kshatriyasya na vidyate. Even from the point of view of your own dharma, you should not recoil from this challenge before you. Sadharmyam. Then for a Kshatriya, a war which is righteous, it is very dangerous proposition. Any war can be righteous. 2 or 3 weeks ago I had occasion to say that a war against Nazi movement in Germany was a righteous war. The whole world would have been completely distorted if that power had won the battle. The whole world joined together to fight against that pernicious doctrine which destroyed millions and millions of people. Occasionally, such occasions of war will come. Not every war is not righteous war, just for aggression. That's no real war at all. But suppose an army invades your country, you are going to lose your freedom. You have to fight to preserve your freedom. That is certainly a very righteous war. On the contrary, if you don't do it, you will pay for it and your generations will pay for it. Therefore, the word swadharmam api japekshya. Swadharma, that is your dharma. The Kshatriya has to protect the freedom of the people. Serve them. That's the nature of a Kshatriya. Today we have the old concept in a new situation. The old Kshatriya today is a politician and the administrator. What is his work? His work is to protect the people, nourish the people, serve the people. Somebody has to do it. It's the political administrative system that do this thing. That is their duty. So Kshatriya is on one side politics administration, the other side defense. That's also Kshatriya's duty. He has to protect the people, even the policemen. You are sleeping at night. The police protect you from being robbed. Though often we don't succeed in it, so many are robbed also at night. That shows our society has become thoroughly demoralized. But the truth is, you can sleep soundly because law is there outside to protect you. That's the nature of law, well established, constitutional society and state. That's the purpose. So in this way, the politician, the administrator, and all the defense services, including civil defense services like the police, they belong to the Kshatriya class. Their work is to serve others with their power, with their energy. They handle power, but the power is for the service of people. That's the nature of that power. So when Yudhishthira wanted to renounce the kingdom after the war, Bhishma told him, this is a very interesting sentence, Mahabharata, Shanti Parva. Danda eva hi Rajendra, Kshatradharmo na mundanam. O Yudhishthira, the duty of a Kshatriya is danda, means exercise of power to serve the people, and not mundana, shaving the head and becoming an ascetic. Mundana means becoming an ascetic. That's not your business. Your business is here. The world has been divided in this way. By choice, you took to be a Kshatriya. Therefore, do your duty. So that is it. Krishna is telling, Dhamyadhi yuddha shreyonyat. A Kshatriya is happy to fight a war which has a great cause to inspire it. A human liberation war, for example. That's beautiful. I'm very happy to participate in it, etc. But we can claim every war as dharmya. That is not accepted. At least history will condemn some wars who were thought to be dharmya, but were not dharmya in later kind of study. So also, this one is perfectly dharmya, to protect your national freedom. A defensive war is always dharmya. Offensive wars, some are not. Very few are. Most are not. But defensive war to protect your freedom, protect your family, your interest, all that is perfectly legitimate and it's a duty. If you don't do so, you have forsaken your duty according to the Sanatana Dharma tradition. Dharmyadhi yuddha shreyonyat. Kshatriyasya na vidyate. A Kshatriya is very happy whenever he gets an opportunity to fight for a noble cause, to serve the people, to protect the people, just like you have sent some soldiers now and officers to monitor the peace between Iran and Iraq. That's a wonderful experience. Like our army went to Congo, our army went to Korea for peacekeeping. These are all very good examples where you are there not for aggression, not for gaining some property or land for yourself, but to establish the peace that was broken earlier. So all these arguments are included in this particular statement. Dharmyadhi yuddha shreyonyat kshatriyasya na vidyate. No better opportunity for a Kshatriya to exercise his intelligence, his ability, his love for man, than to take part in a battle to establish human values, establish freedom, dignity, and the universality of the individual person. Then in this case, the next sloka says, Yadrchaya chopapannam Swargadvaram apavrutam Sugina Kshatriya Partha Labhante Yuddham Edrisham. This war is Yadrchaya chopapannam. You didn't seek it. It has come by itself. Yadrcha, by chance, it has come. We didn't seek it. Yadrchaya chopapannam Swargadvaram apavrutam. The doors of heaven are open. Doors of heaven merely means life of glory. When you fight in such a battle, you get a sense of glory. Yuddha, Swargadvaram apavrutam. Sugina Kshatriya Partha Labhante Yuddha Medrasham. A Kshatriya is happy if he gets such opportunities to exercise his military talent. Other aspects he won't like. That's why much of the army is dissatisfied when they are employed in stopping civil disturbances, killing one's own people. They are not happy at all. And no nation should do it more than a few limited times. If you do more often, you will spoil the whole situation, because there is no legitimacy in that. So in this case, Yadrchayajopapannam. They didn't want the war. They want to avoid it. They did everything possible. And yet, finally, these people became so intolerant of any compromise. They had to get into this mess called war. Nobody accepts war as a necessity. Throughout the Mahabharata, of which the Gita is a part, always try to avoid war. Always try to avoid conflict. Try to seek peace always. That is correct, that is correct. Repeat it again and again. But unavoidable circumstances, don't recoil from the duty that is before you. That also is added here and there. A warlike attitude is not there. A warlike philosophy is not there. But war is there because of the disparity, the human situation. Just like a criminal comes, loots your house, you have to protect yourself against him. If you don't do so, you and your children all will suffer. Therefore, there is need to self-protection and any activity which enforces that self-protection. In that sense only, war is used in the Mahabharata context. The book is spiritual, and the greatest hero there is the Yudhishthira, a man of peace, no hatred to anybody. His name also very interesting. Ajatashatru was the name of Yudhishthira, whose enemy is yet to be born. That is the nature of a man like Yudhishthira. So, his brothers were of this nature, and Krishna is also advising them, forsake war, like that. So if you study the totality of the Mahabharata, you will never find that's a book of war. But war is developing. Human nature had become corrupt in many ways. Arrogance and pride, all these things came. So you can see various incidents leading up to the Kurukshetra. That's why there was no possibility of settling it earlier. When the Mahabharata serial will come in the Doordarshan, you will see the story developing in small ways, developing into the biggest war that we had in ancient times, which really destroyed so much of our humanity and our culture. Things took a different turn thereafter. Mahabharata war is a big turning point in the history of our own country. So, this is Yadrchayajopapannam Swargadvara Bhavavrutam Sugina Kshatriya Partha Labhante Yuddha Medrasham. Then he says, if you don't do so, Atachetvam Imam Dharmyam Sangramam na karishyasi. If you don't face this battle now, Arjuna, what happens to you? Tata swadharmam kirtincha tyaktva hitva. You will destroy your own dharma and your own great name, your good name, kirti. Hitva papam avapsasi. You will incur sin. You have forsaken your duty, your great name also you have destroyed. Making next slokas will say, people will call you coward and all these things. Agirtanchapi bhutani kathayashyanti che avyayam sambhavitasya chagirtir maranad atirichyate. Other people will also speak ill of you. You will be a button of ridicule from other people. Agirtinjavi bhutani kathayashinjate avyayam. Lasting dishonor. Says Arjuna was a coward. He ran away from battle. All these talks will go on. That will be your share later on. And one who has already got a great place of honor, to lose that honor is worse than death itself. That is a wonderful statement. You get it in the English. Death before dishonor is an English statement. But it's exactly what we had in the Mahabharata. Sambhavita sachakirte maranad adirichate. A man with good name and honor, if he gets dishonor, it is worse than death itself. Death is better than living dishonor. That is the wonderful idea. All heroic people think that way. Death is preferable to live in dishonor, infamy, etc. Many people today do not understand this truth. The sense of honor is going down and down. I am prepared even for all dishonor, but I want money, nothing else. Don't touch that. I don't mind any amount of abuse. So we have lost the sense of honor. Money plays a greater part in life. Honor becomes less and less. People want honor. Really, great people want honor. And not mere money. If you abuse a man, he cannot bear it. It is very bad to abuse somebody else. All his honor is gone thereby. If he is a man of honor only, he will feel it. Otherwise, he doesn't care. Let him say anything. I will go my own way. Not philosophically, but because they are interested in something else. How to enjoy this money, how to get maximum of it, like that. I gave the example of C.R. Das, whose father died in debt and insolvency because of poverty. And he had become a lawyer. First case he got some money. See what he did at that time. The first thing he did with that money was go to the court, take the father's name from that dishonor of what he called forfeiting all his, not paying his dues, etc. And then he restored his father's honor. That's what he did. There was no need for him to do, you can say. But he wanted the honor of his father to be restored. What kind of glory it is. So money is secondary. Honor is primary. That lesson we have to learn now in a new way. We have lost it for the last few decades. So, sambhavita sachatirtir maranad adarichyate. Worse than death is dishonor for those who are already holding an honored position. People do not mind today at all losing all their honor. Still they walk about society as if they are big people. And others also clap their hands seeing them, go to see them even. Just like when a man commits a big murder, we all like to go see him. He becomes a center. He will write a book and make ₹1 million also out of that book. That is our taste in society. So, this sentence is very important. If you have a sense of honor, try to protect it. Honor is greater. So, Krishna is telling Arjuna this idea. Other criticisms people will tell about you. Bhayadranat uparatam mamsyante tvam maharathaha. Great heroes will consider Arjuna has run away from battle out of fear, bhaya. They will all say like that. Yesham chatvam bhaumato bhutva yasyasi laghavam. Till now, they all spoke highly of you. They respected your courage, etc. And now onwards, they will speak ill of you. He is a coward. He is a coward. What can be more unhappy than that situation? Krishna is telling Arjuna, Yesham chatvam bhaumato bhutva, by whom you are honored till now, yasyasi laghavam. In their eyes, you will become small, petty, a little coward, etc. Avachya vadamscha bhavan vadishyanti tavahitaha nindandastava samarthyam tato dukkhataram nukim. Then he says, they will speak all sorts of words against you, which is not fit to even hear. It will be burning your mind if you hear those words. Such burning words they will speak against you. Avachya vadamscha bhavan vadishyanti tava ahitaha, your enemies. Sambhavitas. Then nindandastava samarthyam. They will deride your capacities and talents. Tato dukkhadaram nukim. That can be more unhappy, sorrow creating than this situation. You want to have all this? Never go in for it. Give up this cowardice. Face up to your problem is Krishna's advice to Arjuna. And so, summing up this whole section, making Arjuna face up to the situation, Krishna is concluding in verse 37. This is the appeal to those who believe in the world and the higher world like a heaven where you can enjoy nicely. To all such people, this kind of appeal is made. Hato va prapsase swargam, jitva va bhokshase mahim, tasmad uttishta kaunteya, yuddhaya kritanishchayaha. That is the last verse in this section, persuading Arjuna. What did he say? Hato va prapsase swargam. Suppose you are killed in the battle, you will get Veera Swargam, the heroic heaven, heaven meant for heroes. Today, how much we remember the famous Rajput rulers who faced foreign battles and gave up their life with honor and dignity. We remember them. We honor them even today. So, he is telling, Hato va prapsase swargam, jitva va bhokshase mahim. But suppose you win the battle, you also enjoy dominion in this world. So, either way, you are not a loser. That's the appeal to all heroic sentiments in man. Tasmad uttishta kaunteya. Therefore, stand up, Arjuna, the son of Kunti. Kaunteya means the son of Kunti. Yuddhaya kritanishchayaha. Fully determined to face up to the war situation that has come. I shall not run away. I shall face up to this problem. With that determination, stand up, stand up. As I said in the beginning, when I was dealing with the first chapter, Arjuna had a real war to face. You and I do not have real wars to face. But the Gita teaching is relevant to all of us, because the nature of war for you and me is day-to-day problems. We have to face them. We have to overcome them. Summon enough energy from within to face up to all this. That is the philosophy given to one becomes universal in application. Whether you are here or people are in America or Europe, Soviet Russia, China, anywhere, the philosophy remains the same. It did not be always only for a man who has actually to kill somebody in a battle, not at all. So from now onwards, you are taking a particular instance, putting it in a universal context. A profound philosophy of life and action is being expounded hereafter. Its intention was to make Arjuna face up to the battle situation. But its intention with respect to you and me is to make us manly and strong and face up to the life's challenges. Man must show that he is the master of the environment. He should not become a creature of the environment. To restore man to that dignity, you need a philosophy. That is the philosophy Krishna is going to expound throughout this book. It is a philosophy of life, very practical. That's why we will call it now, in the next few verses, yoga. I am teaching you yoga. If I say yoga merely, we only remember pranayama or standing on the head and all these things. Nothing of that here. It is a practical philosophy of life. How to handle this wonderful human situation by which you develop your own spiritual consciousness within and you become instrumental, the happiness and welfare of people around you. That is the philosophy of life, of a comprehensive spirituality that Krishna is expounding, calling it by the short word yoga. You will come to it immediately a few verses later. So here he said, Tasmad uttishta kaunteya, yuddhaya kritanishchayaha. Therefore stand up. Krishna always speaks this word, stand up. Don't lie down. Don't be lazy. Don't be cozy. That kind of thing. Be alert. Be energetic. Be active. Buddha also said, always be alert. Don't be cozy, lazy. There's a tendency for us to be cozy and lazy. That should not be. So in the Vedanta you will find this Uttishtata Jagrata is a constant refrain. Arise, awake, arise, awake. Our tendency is to sleep. Our tendency is to withdraw ourselves into acquiescence. No, life is for the hard-working people, not for the weak, not for the sleepy. That message comes again and again, like the famous verse, popular verse coming from ancient times. Udyamena hi siddhyanti karyani na manamarathaihi nahi suptasya simhasya pravishanti mukhe mrigaha. It is through udyama, hard work, industrious activity, that you achieve things in this world. Udyamena hi siddhyanti karyani na manorathaihi. Not by daydreaming, simply imagining I shall do this, I shall do this. That mano ratha it's called, carrying your mind as a ratha, as a chariot and flying about in the air. That is not the way. Udyamena hi siddhyanti karyani na manorathaihi. Then the example is given. A simha has become a little old. He stopped pursuing his prey. So he will always lie down with a wide open mouth. I am sure some animal will oblige me by entering into my mouth, then I will have my food. That lion will not get any food at all. Nahi suptasya simhasya pravishanti mukhe mrigaha. Mriga means deer. Deers are not going to oblige this simha who has kept his mouth open. Let me enter into him. He will never do so. You have to work hard to get your food for the day. So that is the example given in that verse. Similarly, Krishna is telling here. Now from verse 38, you hear a new music. That music is the original music of Krishna's philosophy of life. From the ancient Upanishads, same teaching which you heard all the time. But from those very teachings, he finds a new teaching, a new philosophy of life. And that is expounding from this 38th verse onwards. Practical Vedanta. If the Vedanta is true, and the infinite Atman, the same Atman is in all beings, if these are true, what follows? How do they affect your life and my life? That is the practical Vedanta that Krishna is bringing out in the remaining verses of this great book. The parting sloka is this, verse 38. What does he say? Sukha dukkhe same krutva labha labhau jaya jayo tato yuddhayi yujyasva naivam papam avapsyasi. Keep your mind even. No excitement up and down. Keep your mind even. Sukha dukkhe in happiness and misery. Labha labhau in profit as well as loss. Jaya Jayo, victory or defeat. In all these various changing situations, try to keep the mind as calm as possible. Tato yuddha yujyasva. With such a mind, enter this battlefield of life. Then you will never suffer. You will succeed. Papam avapsyasi. You will never have incurring sin if you have this attitude. This concept of calmness of mind is a wonderful concept. Whenever you want to achieve great things, it's not through excitement that we achieve. With calm, silent, steady work, you achieve great things. And so, in today's politics, it's all excitement. You go and excite the whole people, and excitement dies down also after some time. But those who are great workers, they are not of that nature. They have tremendous convictions. They are calm and steady. They work. They face problems. They overcome them, keeping their mind calm and steady. It is a calm and steady man that does most of the work. The excited man shows he is working, but very little work turned out. As Dr. Radhakrishnan used to speak in one of his lectures, that modern man and the modern woman particularly do not believe in God. They believe in what they call going about doing good. But when you watch closely, it is more going about than doing good. So much of excitement, so much of noise, and no, so little work is being done. We have plenty of such in our society today. But calm, silent, steady work is real work. That is the work Krishna is telling now. A housewife, it applies to her. Administrator, it applies to him. So also, any professional, it applies to him. Calm, silent, steady work. Can you balance your mind, make it calm and steady? Its tendency is to go up and down. In fact, that's a big psychology in itself. Every experience of the external world throws the mind into waves. Just like putting a stone in a lake, got waves coming. So mind is like that. Every experience turns the mind into waves. Some experiences make for bigger waves, and some becomes extremely Atlantic waves. That is all bad. You are thrown off your ground. You lose your mental balance thereby. So most of us have some measure of balance in the midst of day-to-day life, except when something extraordinary happens to us. But by training, we can increase our capacity to keep the mind steady when unsteadying influences work on it. That's what Krishna is introducing now, because he is giving you a philosophy of life and work. And life and work means upsetting often the mind. So you must handle the mind. You must keep it calm and steady. This is the beginning of the teaching. He will later on define his philosophy itself as samatvam yoga uchyate. Yoga is samatvam. This mind is calm and steady. That is yoga. Normally it is not. Take any animal. Any experience coming to the animal throws his mind into a tremendous convulsion. Then it must find immediate expression in an action. Then it dies away. That's the nature of animal behavior. But in the case of man also, when we have not started training ourselves, very often this is the behavior. When we were primitive, we were doing like this. Though even then, a certain calmness had come to the human system, because nature had provided for it, that every sensory input will be observed, then passed on as a motor output. A little gap between input and output, even the most ordinary men have. That's the beginning of a tremendous development in the human psyche. He is just indicating the beginning of that development, that put a little stop between input and output. Suppose somebody abused me. Immediately I abuse back. Don't do so. That means you are an animal. Automaton, as we say. Somebody put and you return it back. And always we say action and reaction are equal and opposite. That is a mechanical law. But in the case of man, we can alter it. If the action is 1 unit, reaction can be 10 units also. Or it can be no unit also. That shows you are free. There is no other definition of freedom. You are not a creature of some external circumstance. You regulate your reaction. As soon as you start regulating your reaction, you have achieved your manhood, your humanity. Then the march is tremendous. You are handling your mind. You are creating a tremendous sense of calmness there. Then great achievements will come thereby. Human evolution begins with the achievement of this balancing of the mind between a sensory input and a motor output. That must be strengthened more and more, more and more. We shall come across this subject again and again, because the whole subject is training this human mind to handle this world around it and to handle itself in a masterly way. We don't become a creature of some masterly forces outside. We are the masterly force handling our life. This must be achieved by every human being, and our physiology today will tell us that nature has endowed the human being with that organic capacity to handle his life from this masterly point of view. He need not remain a mere creature. He can be free. He can be free. So this teaching of modern biology, neurology, and the ancient Vedanta, they go together. So far as man is concerned, Vedanta takes it to the highest level of development, this wonderful thought of initial human freedom, to put a gap between input and output or experience. That's the beginning. Out of that will come a wonderful achievement. Towards the end of this chapter, after expounding his philosophy, Krishna will give you, in about 18 or 19 verses, the nature of that human mind which has achieved perfect equilibrium, perfect steadiness. It's called Sthita Prajna, that wonderful word, Sthita Prajna. Prajna means knowledge or wisdom. Sthita, steady. Our wisdom is not steady. It comes and goes. But by training, you can make the mind steady. Wisdom steady. Those verses are masterly verses. The end of the second chapter. First, the exposition, then an illustration. That's the type of character we must develop in ourselves. So the whole subject is meant for every citizen, every human being, man, woman, and child. How to build up this human individuality. How to handle this packet of psychophysical energy you have got at birth. How to develop it, expand it, bring out the best out of it. Who has to do it? Yourself. Each one has to do. Others can help, but the actual work is your own. So, Vedanta repeatedly stresses this point. Building up your life and character is your own work, your own privilege. Don't leave it to others. Take help from anybody, but the work is your own. And when you develop, the world will marvel. Yes, there is a one who, with a given capital of psychic energy, he has built up a huge business of intellectual, spiritual life. Right. Yes. Just like any businessman starting with 1,000 rupee capital, later on becomes a millionaire because he invested it properly, worked hard, etc. The same thing in the case of human personality, however it will build up on the given capital, a big personality which is of great blessing to oneself and the world outside. That subject will come now, and hereafter it is all this subject. And the reference is to oneself. Though it is told to Arjuna, Krishna tells it to everyone. What shall I do with my packet of psychic energy? In industry and commerce, we are seeing a new type of entrepreneurship in India. People were generally lazy, cozy, like that before. Freedom has brought a sense of one's own importance and a new energy to work hard. So a few months ago, in the India Today, they published a big dispatch, The New Entrepreneurs in India. And very inspiring article I found. A man has only 1,000 rupees. He invests it, works hard, builds up. Now he has become a big industrialist. Like that, hundreds of cases. India is showing this initiative, this enterprise. No more are we given to Kismat idea. It is my fate to be weak like this. That philosophy is going away. The Gita philosophy is coming. Only addition will come when they read the Gita. These hundreds of new entrepreneurs, if they study the Gita, they will take this aspect of entrepreneurship, initiative, along with it, infinite compassion for man. All this that I earn, I express my personality, I develop resources, I will spend it for the good of all, for the good of society. That second blessing will come to those entrepreneurs when they get the Gita message along with their own tremendous energy and enterprise. Enterprise is beautiful. When I was a student in the high school, I read a small book, a statement from Macaulay and his own teacher, Mill. He says, it is always advisable to be in the forefront of opportunity in matters of enterprise and in the backyard of opportunity in matters of indulgence. For pleasure, you are at the back. For enterprise, you are in front. There's a type. Just like there is food to be cooked, I am there. There is time for eating, the bell has rung, I am there. Some people come only when the bell rings. Some people are ready to do the cooking. That first